Ethan, dismissed by the arrogant car dealer for his modest budget, turns out to be someone no one expected, a famous car blogger with millions of followers. The dealer's condescending attitude is soon exposed in Ethan's viral review, sparking outrage and drastically impacting the dealership's reputation. As the fallout unfolds, the dealership scrambles to make amends, and a surprising opportunity comes knocking. Will the dealer redeem himself, or has the damage been done for good? Find out how one moment of arrogance spiraled into an unforgettable chain of events. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. And if this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. In the bustling showroom of Harrington Motors, a dealership known for its luxurious cars and even more luxurious clientele, sleek sports cars and luxury sedans glistened under the bright overhead lights. The sales team moved effortlessly from one potential customer to the next, their smiles polished and their words smooth as they touted the merits of each vehicle. James Worthington, one of the dealership's senior salesmen, stood by a silver luxury sedan, tapping his pen impatiently against his clipboard. He prided himself on only dealing with serious buyers, the kind who showed up in designer suits with checks ready to be written. To him, time was money, and anyone who looked like they couldn't afford the showroom's offerings wasn't worth his effort. As he surveyed the room, James's attention was caught by a young man in his mid-20s, dressed in worn jeans, sneakers, and a simple hoodie. The young man moved between cars, studying each one with genuine interest, his fingers trailing lightly over the polished surfaces. James smirked. He had seen this type before, dreamers who wandered in, fantasizing about owning something they could never afford. He watched as the young man approached a sleek convertible, his eyes lighting up at the sight. "Can I help you with something?" James called, his voice dripping with condescension. The young man looked up, his face brightening. "Yeah, actually, I was hoping to take a look at some options within my budget. I'm looking for something reliable, but also with a bit of flair." James raised an eyebrow, glancing at the young man's outfit and then at the convertible. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Do you have a specific budget in mind?" he asked, though it was clear from his tone that he already doubted it would be worth his time. The young man nodded, unfazed by James's demeanor. "I'm looking to spend around $15,000, he said, his voice confident. James's laugh was loud enough to turn heads. "$15,000, he repeated, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You do realize where you are, don't you? This is Harrington Motors, not some used car lot." The young man's smile wavered slightly, but he held his ground. "I understand that," he said calmly. "But I was hoping you might have something in that range, maybe an older model or a trade-in." James shook his head, his expression one of pure amusement. "We don't have anything for that price, kid. Maybe try somewhere else, somewhere more suited to your budget." He turned away, dismissing the young man entirely, but not before adding, "And good luck finding anything with flair for $15,000. The young man stood there for a moment, his face impassive. Then, with a slight nod, he turned and walked out of the showroom, the door closing behind him with a soft chime. That evening, James sat in the dealership's break room, sharing the story of the young man with his colleagues, his voice filled with mockery. "He really thought he could get something decent here for 15 grand. James laughed, shaking his head. The other salesmen chuckled along, none of them giving it a second thought. Meanwhile, the young man, whose name was Ethan Roberts, sat at his small but cozy home office, typing away at his computer. The experience at Harrington Motors had left a sour taste in his mouth, but it wasn't the first time he had encountered that kind of treatment. He knew that the world of luxury cars could be snobbish, dismissing anyone who didn't fit a particular mold. But what the salespeople at Harrington Motors didn't know was that Ethan was no ordinary customer. He was, in fact, the creator and writer behind the Car Chronicles, one of the most popular car blogs on the internet. Known for his honest reviews, his insightful articles on car culture, and his in-depth looks at vehicles from all price ranges, Ethan had built a following of millions of readers who trusted his opinions and valued his perspective. He had reviewed everything from high-end luxury sports cars to budget-friendly everyday vehicles, and his readers loved him for his transparency and fairness. Today, he would be writing about his experience at Harrington Motors. The next morning, Ethan's latest post went live, Harrington Motors, where modest budgets get laughed at. The headline alone was enough to draw attention, but it was the content that truly struck a chord with his readers. Ethan described his experience in detail, how he had been treated with disdain the moment he mentioned his budget, how the salesman's laughter echoed in the showroom, and how it made him wonder how many others had been turned away simply because they didn't look the part. He spoke about the culture of elitism in certain dealerships and how it alienated potential buyers, and he questioned why a place like Harrington Motors seemed to care more about appearances than actual customers. He ended the post with a note to his readers. If you're looking for a dealership that treats you with respect, regardless of your budget, I suggest you take your business elsewhere. The response was immediate. Comments poured in from readers who shared similar experiences, who had been turned away or treated poorly because they didn't look like they could afford a car. The post was shared thousands of times on social media, and within hours, it had gone viral. At Harrington Motors, it didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By midday, the phones were ringing off the hook, not with interested buyers, but with angry callers demanding answers. Emails flooded the inboxes of the dealership's management, many of them citing Ethan's blog post and expressing their disgust at the treatment described. James, oblivious to the growing storm, was busy trying to close a deal when he was called into the manager's office. The manager, a stern man named Richard, sat behind his desk, his face pale as he held up a printout of Ethan's blog post. "Do you know who this is?" Richard demanded, pointing to Ethan's picture at the top of the article. James frowned, glancing at the printout. "Yeah, that's the guy from yesterday. The one with the ridiculous budget." Richard's expression darkened. "That guy is Ethan Roberts. He runs one of the most influential car blogs on the internet. And thanks to you, we're now the laughingstock of the industry." James felt his stomach drop. I didn't know," he stammered, his face turning red. Richard shook his head, his voice filled with barely contained anger. "You didn't bother to treat him with respect. You didn't bother to find out who he was. And now, we're paying the price. Do you know how many cancellations we've had today? How many angry emails we've received? People are boycotting us because of this." James swallowed hard, his mind reeling. He had never imagined that the young man he had dismissed could wield so much power, that his words could have such a profound impact. Desperate to salvage their reputation, Harrington Motors decided to reach out to Ethan. They crafted a public apology, posting it on their social media channels and on their website. They expressed regret for the way he had been treated, stating that they valued every customer, regardless of their budget, and that they were taking steps to ensure that such behavior would never happen again. Privately, Richard reached out to Ethan, inviting him back to the dealership and offering to personally assist him in finding a car within his budget. He assured Ethan that James had been reprimanded and that they were committed to making things right. Ethan received the message but took his time in responding. He had seen similar apologies before, businesses scrambling to save face after being called out publicly. But he also believed in second chances, in giving people an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. A week later, Ethan decided to take Richard up on his offer. He arrived at Harrington Motors, dressed in the same casual attire as before, his hands in his pockets as he walked through the showroom doors. Richard greeted him warmly, his demeanor a stark contrast to James's dismissive attitude. He led Ethan around the showroom, showing him various options and treating him with the respect that every customer deserved. James, standing off to the side, watched with a mixture of shame and regret, his usual arrogance nowhere to be seen. Ethan could see the effort Richard was making, and he appreciated it. After looking at several cars, he finally found one that suited his needs, a reliable sedan that was both practical and stylish. It wasn't flashy, but it had the flair he had been looking for. Richard personally handled the paperwork, ensuring that everything went smoothly. As they wrapped up the deal, Richard looked at Ethan, his expression earnest. "I hope this can be the start of a better relationship between us," he said. Ethan nodded, a small smile on his face. "I appreciate the effort you've made. I really do. But remember, it's not just about me. It's about how you treat every customer who walks through those doors." Richard nodded, understanding the weight of Ethan's words. A few days later, Ethan wrote a follow-up post on his blog. He described his return to Harrington Motors, the changes he had seen, and the genuine effort Richard had made to make things right. He acknowledged the apology and the steps they were taking to improve, but he also reminded his readers of the importance of respect in customer service, how every individual, regardless of their budget, should be treated with dignity and fairness. The post ended on a hopeful note, with Ethan stating that he was willing to give Harrington Motors another chance and that he hoped others would do the same. It was a fair and honest review, one that praised the dealership's efforts to make amends while also holding them accountable. The response was immediate. Ethan's readers appreciated his balanced perspective, and many commented that they were impressed by Harrington Motors' efforts to make things right. Some even expressed their willingness to reconsider the dealership for their next purchase. But what no one expected was the twist that would unfold just a week later. A week after Ethan's follow-up post, Richard received a call from a well-known car manufacturer. The representative on the other end of the line explained that they had seen the blog posts and were impressed by the way Harrington Motors had handled the situation. They appreciated the humility in the apology and the efforts to improve customer service. The representative went on to explain that they were looking for a dealership to partner with for an upcoming promotional event, a chance to showcase a new line of cars, with coverage from top car bloggers and influencers. They wanted Harrington Motors to host the event. Richard was stunned. The viral review that had initially seemed like a nightmare was now turning into an opportunity, a chance to turn things around and prove that Harrington Motors could be better. Without hesitation, Richard agreed. The day of the promotional event arrived, and Harrington Motors was transformed. The showroom was filled with brand new models from the manufacturer, each one more impressive than the last. The dealership was bustling with activity, with representatives from the car manufacturer, invited guests, and most notably, influential car bloggers and reviewers from all over. Among the invited guests was Ethan. He had received an invitation from the manufacturer, and while he was initially hesitant, he decided to attend. He wanted to see for himself how Harrington Motors handled the pressure of hosting such a high-profile event. As he walked into the showroom, Ethan was greeted warmly by Richard, who seemed genuinely pleased to see him. Richard introduced Ethan to the representatives from the car manufacturer, and to Ethan's surprise, they already knew who he was. "We've read your blog," one of them said with a smile. "Your honesty and integrity are what led us to choose Harrington Motors for this event. We're glad you're here." Ethan was taken aback. He hadn't realized just how far-reaching his influence had become, and it was humbling to know that his words had played a part in creating this opportunity. As Ethan moved through the showroom, he noticed James standing by one of the cars, looking visibly nervous. It was clear that the events of the past weeks had shaken him, and he was no longer the arrogant salesman Ethan had encountered before. James approached Ethan cautiously, his expression a mix of regret and humility. "Ethan, I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice sincere. "I was wrong to judge you, and I've learned a lot from this experience. I know I can't change what happened, but I hope I can do better moving forward." Ethan looked at James for a long moment, then nodded. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said. "What matters is that you learn from them and make an effort to change." James nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Ethan offered a small smile before moving on, leaving James with a sense of hope. It wasn't an instant redemption, but it was a step in the right direction. As the event continued, Ethan found himself drawn to one of the new models on display, a sleek, powerful sports car that seemed to be the star of the event. He took his time examining it, running his hands over the smooth curves and admiring the craftsmanship. A representative from the manufacturer approached him, smiling. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. Ethan nodded. "It's incredible," he replied. "It's the kind of car that makes you fall in love with driving all over again." The representative's smile widened. "How would you like to take it for a spin?" Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Absolutely," the representative said. "In fact, we'd like you to be the first to review it. We've seen your work, and we think you're the perfect person to showcase what this car can do." Ethan was stunned. He had come to the event with no expectations, and now he was being offered the chance to be the first to review one of the most highly anticipated cars of the year. It was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. The next day, Ethan found himself behind the wheel of the sleek new sports car, the engine purring beneath him as he drove down an open stretch of road. The car was everything he had hoped for: powerful, responsive, and exhilarating. He filmed the entire experience, capturing every detail. The way the car handled curves, the feeling of acceleration, the luxurious interior. It was the kind of car that made you forget everything else, the kind that made you feel alive. By the time he returned the car to the dealership, Ethan was filled with excitement. He couldn't wait to share his experience with his readers, to let them know just how incredible this car was. Ethan's review went live a few days later, and as expected, it garnered immediate attention. He described the car in vivid detail, his words painting a picture of the thrill of driving it. He spoke about the event at Harrington Motors, the changes he had seen, and the effort they were making to treat every customer with respect. The response was overwhelmingly positive. His readers were thrilled by the review, and many commented on how impressed they were with Harrington Motors' transformation. The dealership, once the subject of ridicule, was now being praised for its commitment to change. The car manufacturer was pleased as well, sharing Ethan's review on their official channels and thanking him for his honesty and insight. It was the kind of publicity that money couldn't buy, and it solidified Ethan's reputation as one of the most trusted voices in the car community. For Harrington Motors, the impact of Ethan's review was profound. The dealership saw an increase in foot traffic, with customers coming in not just for the cars, but because they wanted to see the place that had been willing to change. Richard made sure that every customer was treated with the respect they deserved, regardless of their budget, and he worked hard to create an atmosphere of inclusivity and fairness. James, too, had changed. He was no longer the dismissive salesman who judged customers by their appearance. He had learned the hard way that you never knew who was walking through those doors, and he was determined to do better. As for Ethan, his experience with Harrington Motors had been a journey, a reminder of the power of words, of the importance of respect, and of the impact one person could have. He had never set out to make an example of the dealership, but in the end, that was exactly what had happened. And as he sat at his computer, reading through the comments on his latest post, Ethan couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just about cars, it was about people, about the connections we made, and about the way we treated one another. And that, he realized, was what truly made the ride worth it.